Whenever you see your opponent's Pokemon lineup, you have some expectations as to what those Pokemon are going to do. If you see a Talonflame, you think priority Tailwind, perhaps some other strong flying type attacks. If you see Grimmsnarl, you're thinking screens are going to happen as well as some form of speed control. If you see the Chien-Pao Dragonite combo, you're expecting to want to uninstall your game after it's done being played. For this week's Funday Monday, I told my viewers that they had to pick at least one Pokemon on their team and entirely circumvent those expectations. I've got 3 really cool games to show you, so let's get right into it. The first game of the week is brought to you by Kamikaze Kid. This is Chaotic Rouse in the bottom left-hand corner. That's where I put viewer submitters usually. Now, I'm going to give away the role reversal right away. It's going to be the Vivillon. And this is really cool because Vivillon is normally a Pokemon who, at best, is going to get about 2 actions before getting KO'd. It's going to be some combination of Rage Powder or Sleep Powder, and boy, your fingers better be crossed that your opponent is not holding safety goggles. Otherwise, it goes extremely poorly. And Chaotic Rouse is going to show us here what it looks like when Vivillon gets to flex a little bit. I have this game on a quicker speed because it's going to take a little bit longer. Goodra is going to attempt to do Goodra things, and Electrode is going to attempt to distribute some paralysis, and Vivillon is just going to start doing Quiver Dance. A whole bunch of Quiver Dance is going to get ready for a big sweep. I love how Grimmsnarl does fake tears, and Chaotic Rouse just says, nah, I'm going to keep Quiver Dancing. We're swapping to Gallade here because I think the goal is to punch through some of that defensive-ness from Goodra with Sacred Sword. Now, unfortunately, with the Flying Terra, it doesn't even do that much. And Vivillon is just biding time, ready to go. Finally claims that first KO against the Grimmsnarl, and this is even through Light Screen. The Reflect matters a little bit less. Gallade didn't really do the thing that it was meant to do. Vivillon's going to put the Cresselia to sleep and just keep on going. Notably, we see Miss Brit come in and try to boost up a little bit to set up its own sweep, but the star of the show is really Vivillon, especially when you consider that body press that it took a couple of turns ago. Even with a 3 times defense Goodra, that double resistance just really makes a big difference for Vivillon continuing to do Vivillon things. Turn 10 is so funny because when I first watched this replay, I was like, oh no, it's a real Pokemon that's coming to attack. But with triple special attack, triple speed, Vivillon is able to dispatch it no problem at all. For game 2 of the week, Yeet is back for a repeat performance and another team of just 4 Pokemon. Now, if you looked at this through a normal lens and you were trying to decide, all right, which Pokemon here are absolutely going to be the big hitters? I want you to think about your answer to that for a second while I start this game. The opponent's going to open Chien-Pao and Palafin to Pelipper and Clodsire. The Palafin, as most Palafins are wont to do, is going to swap out immediately. And it's actually going to be Pelipper that does the Terastallization, which is so funny to me for a couple of reasons. After this turn plays out, I want to talk about that. Earthquake is going to clip the Pelipper a little bit, and Fluttermane is going to come out. It tickles me so much for 2 reasons, because Yeet decided that hitting his own Pelipper with the Earthquake was okay just to get that Surf to do more damage. This was not a Surf just to heal. This is a purposeful Surf that was also meant to do damage, and it got rid of the Chien-Pao entirely. And what makes it extra funny is that when the Earthquake happened, it only hit the Pelipper. The Dragonite was fine. The Dragonite was totally fine. I'm going to continue this game. That is going to be, unfortunately, the only thing that Pelipper gets to do. It gets sent home, but Clodsire, once again, stares in the face of the enemy and says, I am just fine, taking out the Fluttermane. Now, Yeet makes a really interesting choice here. Swaps out the Clodsire, sets up the Reflect on Regieleki, and that's the only thing it gets to do, and then Dragonite decides, hey, I don't need my flying type anymore. This Clodsire is not that scary. Luminion's going to do the same thing that Pelipper was going to do, but also is going to take out the Dragonite. That's what was so interesting about this run, is that obviously the purpose was to support Clodsire doing just absolute butt tons of damage. But the two Pokemon responsible for surfing and activating the Water Absorb both also KO'd a Pokemon. So it was a whole neat little showing of domination from Pokemon that are not normally so offensive, except the Regieleki, who only did a Reflect before getting KO'd. The third game of the week is brought to you by Krebs and Zoich, a special joint submission. Krebs asked my permission to submit not a ranked ladder game, but a set between him and Zoich. This is game 2 from that set, and it's one of the more ridiculous Pokemon games that I've ever seen. I can't wait to show you how this unfolds. Zoich is going to open with Daldalis the Dudunsparce. That took about 4 takes to say right. And One Trick Pony, not Espeon. Espeon's the one I like. The Sylveon. One Trick Pony is going to protect, and that's probably the only normal thing that happens in this whole game. Crimes the Murkrow is going to stick on a Brave Bird, and Garchomp the Garchomp is going to start setting hazards. And then One Trick Pony the Sylveon is going to do Last Resort, a pixelated, boosted Last Resort after only doing Protect. So the Sylveon has Protect and Last Resort, and that's it. Goldmember the Goldengo steps in, Worthorn, the Orthworm, going to swap out for Zoich. Garchomp is going to set up some more hazards, and then both Daldalis and Goldmember are going to dish out some paralysis onto their respective opponents. Turn 4 is super funny because you're going to see Krebs and Zoich make the same mistake, and that's targeting Goldengo with something that it can't target with. Good as Gold is going to block off both of that before Worthorm goes down to a well-placed Hex. And then we have the real star of the show, and that's Moose, the Ting-Lu. Garchomp is going to swap out for Karen the Annihilate, and Moose is going to become a ground type and is just going to start earthquaking things. Friends, foes, doesn't matter. Daldalis is going to be collateral damage in Moose's great quest for victory. One Trick Pony is going to come out and get clipped by a couple of hazards that are somehow still there. Karen the Annihilate is going to get a helping hand boost. Rage Fist, unfortunately, doesn't do a whole lot. Zoich, unfortunately, is going to misstep a little bit. Last Resort cannot be used, and that is unfortunately the last thing it's going to get to do, because Moose again scores a double KO, but not the good kind of double KO. Just one ally and one opponent for both of the Earthquakes. Luckily, Moose is able to bring it home with one last Earthquake that only hits a proper target. And that concludes this week's Funday Monday. I hope you enjoyed the absolute tomfoolery of the games for this week, and I'm ready to share with you what's coming up next. The theme for week 7 is as follows. You are only allowed to attack a Pokemon after you inflict it with a stat drop or status condition. If you target a slot that has been afflicted with one of those two things and they switch out instead, that attack is still allowed. You are simply not allowed to target any Pokemon that you have not inflicted with a stat drop or status condition first. Submit those replays, and I'll see you next week.